When she grabbed the suitcase and slammed it onto the tarmac, I half expected it to burst into flames from the heat of her fury. The hat on my head was like a red flag to a bull, and her sarcastic smirk was the storm's final warning. Little did she know, that suitcase held more than just clothes. It held her entire future. Now the question is, how far am I willing to go to make sure she never forgets this day? Ben Harper, a 48-year-old man with silvering hair and a casual but polished demeanor, walked onto the plane wearing a MAGA hat perched slightly askew. He dragged a sleek leather suitcase, its polished edges gleaming under the cabin's harsh fluorescent lights. His posture was relaxed, but his sharp eyes scanned the rows of seats like a predator surveying its domain. Enter Claire Matthews, a flight attendant in her early 30s with a reputation for her biting sarcasm and zero tolerance for difficult passengers. Her auburn hair was neatly tied in a bun, but the tightness of her forced smile hinted at the simmering frustration beneath. She spotted Ben's hat from the corner of her eye and rolled her eyes so dramatically it could have qualified as a theatrical performance. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone sugar-coated with disdain. "Your bag is too large for the overhead bin. I'll have to check it for you." Ben raised an eyebrow. "It fits just fine, thanks." But Claire wasn't having it. "Policy's policy," she shot back, grabbing the suitcase before he could respond. The other passengers glanced nervously as she dragged it down the aisle like it was toxic waste. Ben sighed and sank into his seat. A few moments later, he watched from the window as Claire hurled the suitcase onto the tarmac with all the grace of a professional shot putter. His expression didn't change, but the slight twitch in his jaw was the only betrayal of his thoughts. The plane took off, but Claire kept throwing icy glares at Ben whenever she passed. He remained composed, quietly flipping through an in-flight magazine. Little did she know, this was the calm before a storm brewing at 30,000 feet. The tension between Claire and Ben thickened with every passing minute. When drink service began, she purposefully skipped over him. He raised a hand, but she breezed past, her eyes focused on anything but his. "Ma'am?" he called after her, his voice calm but firm. "I'd like a coffee, please." Claire stopped and turned, her forced smile bordering on hostile. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you." Her tone dripped with insincerity. She handed him a lukewarm cup of coffee, her fingers lingering just long enough to spill a few drops onto his lap. Ben dabbed at the spill with a napkin. "Thank you," he said, his tone neutral, though there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. Meanwhile, the captain made an announcement, thanking the passengers for flying Harper Air. A murmur rippled through the cabin, and Claire frowned. "Harper Air?" she muttered under her breath. The name was vaguely familiar, but she brushed it off, focusing instead on her mission to ignore Ben for the rest of the flight. However, turbulence struck as if the universe itself had decided to intervene. The plane jolted violently, sending Claire stumbling into Ben's row. He caught her arm, steadying her with surprising ease. "Careful there," he said, his voice tinged with bemusement. She pulled away as if burned, mumbling a curt thanks before scurrying off. The passengers whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that suggested they were as uncomfortable with Claire's behavior as they were with the turbulence. As the flight neared its destination, Ben leaned back in his seat, a small smile playing on his lips. Claire, meanwhile, was oblivious to the unfolding drama that would soon ground her career. When the plane landed, Claire watched passengers disembark with practiced indifference. Ben was one of the last to leave, tipping his hat as he passed her. "Thank you for the memorable service," he said, his tone light but with an edge that made her stomach twist. She dismissed him with a tight smile, eager to clock out and complain about the MAGA guy to her colleagues. But as she entered the terminal, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. Standing near the gate was Ben, now surrounded by a group of impeccably dressed individuals. A banner above them read, Welcome to Harper Air headquarters. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, and Claire's heart sank as she realized the man whose suitcase she'd hurled and coffee she'd spilled wasn't just any passenger. He was Benjamin Harper, the billionaire owner of the airline. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Ben caught Claire's eye. He didn't smirk or gloat. Instead, he gave her a small, knowing nod before turning to address the reporters. Claire's legs felt like jelly as she retreated into the staff lounge. Her mind raced with what-ifs and regrets, knowing she'd soon have to answer for her actions. And as Ben's voice carried through the terminal, thanking his team for their dedication, Claire could only wonder what kind of storm she'd just unleashed on herself.